Hi, folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about this, these arms shipments, these arms deals, weapons deals being sent to Ukraine to the tune of well over 100 billion now, US dollars, and also arms for Israel, which is not such a big headline thing anymore because it's been going on for so long. The US support of Israel with various arms shipments of all sorts of things, weapons, technology, and so on. Let me just have let me just review some of this because I think we're missing the benefit. Some of the benefits are perverse and not obvious, and so I just want to explore some of those. I don't know for those of you who are old enough to remember the Afghanistan war when the Soviet Union, the communist Soviet Union, invaded Afghanistan to install a pro-Soviet government in Afghanistan. Afghanistan, by the way, having a border with the Soviet Union or the Greater Russian area. So it's a sensitive issue for the Russians. And so when the Russians invaded, the Americans were sending weapons and training and logistical support to any group that was prepared to oppose the Russians. These groups were primarily the Islamic fundamentalist type groups, which later on turned against America, using the weapons and the training that the Americans had given them. Oh, the irony. But the American view in the wider sort of geopolitical foreign policy view was they could bleed the Russians, the Soviet Union as it was then, they could bleed the Soviet Union. This is, by the way, during the Cold War era. Bleed the Soviet Union of resources and men and money and material. Even a small war like that they had there is still quite expensive. So this was seen as just frustrating the aims and ambitions of the Soviet Union, while at the same time draining them of the resources. The cost and the aggravation of the Afghanistan war that the Soviet Union was in was credited with, wrongly I think, was credited with or as being a significant contributing factor to the ultimate fall and demise of the Soviet Union. I'm not sure I agree with that. I think the Soviet Union was in a whole lot of trouble for many reasons, economically and structurally, and they simply lost direction. And so this war was an irritant, perhaps, but certainly nothing significant. But the Americans thought it was. They thought, hey, it's worth investing serious money and time and effort because it irritates and annoys the Soviet Russians. And this is the same thing as they view the Ukraine war, and they considerably overestimate the aggravation and the cost and so on. If you look at, say, the Russian army overall, I think is between 5 and 6 times bigger than the Ukrainian army. The Russian industrial base is substantially larger than the Ukrainian industrial base is, and access to resources, as in raw materials and oil and so on. Then again, the Russians have vastly more than the Ukrainians do. So there's no hope of this being in proportion and irritation to Russia. It's devastating for Ukraine. But again, a minor irritation really for the Russians. That they haven't gone on mass mobilization. They haven't had to adjust the economy to war economy in Russia. So the irritation to Russia is fairly minimal. On top of that, if due to economic blockades, the Russians then have to substitute their own manufacturing for what otherwise would have been imported, then that's simply developing Russian industry, giving Russians jobs and denying jobs and so on to Western suppliers and the like. So it's this idea the Americans have. I think it's a mindset that's the same in conceptually the same as the British mindset, that they always had to ensure a balance of power on the European continent in order for Britain to maintain its empire and its integrity and its preeminence. and they held this view long after the view was no longer relevant. As soon as the advanced, as in the early advanced industrial age, really by 1880, 1890, around there, that attitude of balance of power on a continent ceased to be relevant. It was no longer, technology and innovation and advances in technology, industrial economic power. These were now the issues rather than territorial conquest. But the British never could let go of that, and so they stuck to that mindset even in the 1930s, when it was well out of date, and it caused them all sorts of going into war. World War One and World War Two was to maintain this balance of power, ended up destroying the British economically, knocked them from being one of the top three economies, knocked them well down the ladder in the end. And it meant they weren't investing in technology and innovation, and that they weren't investing in that. Instead, they were investing in, strange, perverse geopolitics that were, 100 years out of date. So, and I think the Americans are stuck in that mindset as well, in terms of if we can, if we subsidise and throw fuckloads of money at places like Ukraine that are fighting the Russians, then we're going to really, really hurt the Russian economy, and we're going to really fuck them up. And I don't think it's having anywhere near the effect on Russia as the Americans would in their in their fantasy type dreams believe. Now, coming to the issue of weapons to the Ukraine, weapons to anybody really, doesn't matter. I think we're at the point which come along every 20 or so years. I think we're at the point of high technological changeover in weapons. Now, there are periods in time when the technological changeover is huge. You can have sort of periods of 10 to 20 years where the technology doesn't really change that much. And then you'll have a sudden jump and spike in technological change. The problem is, though, any wealthy country, at least, they have a whole lot of weapons that are now out of date because the technological change spike has come along, and they look back and think, shit, we got this whole technology. And the key players in the big military game, we either need to have a huge edge over them with the latest technology, or the other guys have got a lot of that new technology, and so we need that to combat their position and to oppose them. The other guys have got the latest kit. We have to have it too. What do we do with all this old kit? We need to effectively replenish with the latest technology, replenish our arsenal, our military arsenal. But if we go to Congress or we go to Parliament and say, look, we want gazillions of dollars just to build new weapons, there's going to be all sorts of screaming and crying. But if we give all our old weapons to the Ukraine to fight the war against Russia, we can appear as morally virtuous. We're fighting those evil Russians. Putin is Hitler, and all. We're fighting those evil Russians, getting rid of our old technology, and we're saying, well, we're giving billions upon billions to those guys, which effectively means that we get gazillions upon billions to build all these new latest technology weapons. So we've got the latest high-tech arsenal, and we've got rid of our older kit. So there's on top of that, there's a few of the weapons that are sent are some of the more recent innovations in weaponry, whether it be to Ukraine or Israel or whatever. And so it allows for field testing under battlefield conditions. Now, if you want to really know what a weapon can do, you have to test it in battlefield conditions. It's all very well on a firing range or in a laboratory or that sort of thing, and a lot of optimistic assumptions get built in when you're not in battlefield conditions. But if you look at say World War II as a case in point, some of the technological innovations in the war, in everything, armor and structure in manufacturing and so on, and speed of manufacturing and facilities, the mechanics, the whole nine yards. So it's all very well, again, in the factory and on the testing ground, but in the battlefield, it's completely different. The Russians had a diesel engine that could go technically at least could go nearly 70 kilometres an hour in terms of spec, but in summertime they could rarely get above 20 kilometres an hour because the thing would overheat and just plain stop. And in the winter, it had the opposite effect, where some of the key hydraulics would freeze and they couldn't use it, and so on. So in the battlefield, they had real problems with this product, which was a battlefield tank, even though the tank had many innovations. Now there were other things like the conditions in the tank, because the turret was designed to be highly resistant to projectiles, but because it had that shape and that narrowness, it made it very difficult for the gunners to load the gun. So they had a two shots a minute rate, whereas the Wehrmacht tanks they're up against had several times that. These sorts of things, but only in battlefield conditions and battlefield stresses can these things adequately come out, and then the necessary modifications and upgrades made. So battlefield testing is important wherever there are conflicts around the world. Military theorists and just designers and engineers jump at the chance of battlefield testing, because it shows them just how well. So we're looking at the battlefield testing of certain technologies and new weapons, and this is a benefit again for designers and those concerned with producing the next generation or upgrading the existing generation, so it becomes far more formidable than otherwise it would be, in terms of the redesigning of it or ironing out bugs, those sorts of things. So this idea of giving billions to Ukraine, some people seem to have the idea that some American guy that rocks on up with a wheelbarrow full of greenbacks and go, here you go, folks, and then all the Ukrainians sort of dive into the wheelbarrow, grabbing handfuls of greenbacks and running off to the hills. It's not like that. Now, let's suppose, and I just want to sort of give some perspectives. Let's suppose the local grocery store in your town said, look, we're going to give every citizen of the district $100 worth of groceries. Every citizen gets $100 worth of groceries. You think, okay, and you think in terms of $100. Okay, well, I can get this and that. I can buy a few I don't know, frozen chickens, and I can get this and that, milk and bread and that. So you think what you can buy, but you turn up to get your $100 worth of groceries, and instead the grocery store gives you a $1 bar of chocolate, a $1, not $100, but a $1 bar of chocolate. And you go, what's this? This is a $1 bar of chocolate. They say, no, we value that. We value. We said we give you $100 worth of groceries, and we value that $1 chocolate bar at $100. We value it at $100. So by taking that chocolate bar, we can report to the media that we gave $100 worth of value. What? That's bullshit. Which of course it is. But this is also a part of the scam game that gets played with these big headline numbers, because it's I think the last recent one was like 60 billion or 80 billion US dollars that Congress allegedly approved of aid to Ukraine and Israel, the military aid. So this money goes to contractors, as in military contractors, so they can sell the stuff they've got on the shelf, their older technology they don't want anymore. Maybe they got accumulated parts and bits and pieces, and they want to get rid of that shit too. So they'll build new stuff, again, older technology, and get rid of it. But that, again, all battlefield tested, so they have the option of something that might be seen as old technology, but you can do a few upgrades to it, a few redesigns and this and that. A few engineering changes, and actually, we can actually keep this. This is still pretty good technology if we make these adjustments. So you get those. So it goes to the military contractors. They sell all their old shit, get rid of that, and then they've got all this money to now spend on the new technology weapons, which will be things more with drones, satellites. And long range identification, all sorts of higher technology things latest technology, the cutting edge technology, which can make a difference. Look at the Iraq War. Now, a lot of people were surprised that just with something in the region of 100,000 soldiers, and less than half of those, I think, front line, but with just 100,000 soldiers, the Americans were able to so quickly conquer a pretty decent and battle experienced Iraqi army. They've been fighting for years against Iran, so these weren't just all parade ground flunkies. These were battle hardened troops, or many of them were. So how did the Americans win so quickly? Well, a lot of this was technological. The technology, the main technological backbone of the Iraqi army was sort of 1970s technology versus 1990s technology, particularly with things like satellites and guiding systems for missiles, that sort of stuff, particularly in those areas. The Americans had advanced technology, only 20 years in it, but a lot happened in that 20 years. If you look at this, where tanks were a brand new invention in 1917, 1918 in World War I, and look at how far the technology had come along by 1939-40 during World War II. So only a 20-year gap there, and a huge difference in technology. Same when you look at aircraft. Nearly all the aircraft in World War I were made of wood, for fuck's sake. Wooden aircraft flying around, but by World War II, you had these completely different, almost chalk and cheese the way they looked. They're completely different aircraft, all made of various metals and so on, and completely different looking, vastly superior speed and aerodynamics. Again, all happened in 20 years. So this is the difference in quite a small army can overcome a much larger army by having much more advanced technology. Now, it doesn't always work that way in close quarters. If you look at sort of the low technology army of the Chinese when they entered the Korean War, they simply made up with surprise and ambush, which they're quite good at. Coming down off those Korean mountains and ambushing the Americans there. And for some reason, I don't know how the Americans were caught strangely flat-footed on that one. But they had this idea of charging down machine gun nests. So the Americans had a lot of machine gun nests, well equipped, well supplied, all this sort of thing. But the Chinese took the view of it's a swarming technique. That if you get enough guys charging down the machine gun nest, that a shitload of them will die. But after a while, dead bodies will pile up, so that the machine gunner can no longer have a clean vision, a clean range of shooting. And so he's only shooting into the pile of dead bodies, if you like. And so you jump over the top and they can overwhelm the machine gun nests, which they did. So it's very low tech, but it's effective when you get close quarters, massed boots on ground type conflict, which is possible but unlikely to be the case in any future conflict. So these are the perverse benefits of the handing out of money. You get the weapons testing, weapons upgrading, new generation weapons, clean out the old weapons that are really somewhat useless or minimally effective, given the new generation of weapons technology. And you can, again, this I think falsely placed geopolitical view where they think they pretend that they're hurting the Russian economy far more than they really are. And in the end, there is a benefit to the West, as perverse as it may be. Those are the benefits, and those are and it's as much as we may rile about the military-industrial complex, and it does get on the nose sometimes, the dirty backroom deals and so on. The reality is, I'd much rather the West had a healthy military-industrial capacity than not have one at all, or have one that was ineffective or enfeebled. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.